The most hauntingly happy Halloween ever. Visit Party City in the Triangle Plaza, Wilkes-Barre, the largest Halloween headquarters in the Northeast. No one matches Party City's selection. Over 400 children and adult costumes to choose from, including WWF and WCW wrestling costumes, Scream, Austin Powers, Teletubbies, and more. We have the largest selection of costume accessories, wigs, makeup, masks, and props. We guarantee the lowest price. If a competitor's advertised price is lower than ours, we'll match the price and take an additional 15% off. Party City in the Triangle Plaza, Wilkes-Barre.
Oh yeah! Are you ready to party? Not me. I don't do that. But a lot of people do. People like parties. Social gatherings with other individuals that I don't even want to associate with. Okay, so yeah, it's really not for me. But, most people, I think, enjoy the whole party scene, to hang out. Even something casual like a birthday party or something. Anything you can imagine when it comes to these sorts of things could be found at Party City. It's a whole city full of parties. Not really, it's a store chain, but, with party stuff. It's a specialty store, which we've gone over before, that sells merchandise that caters to, parties. And as you can imagine, the general merchandise they sell is gonna rotate quite a bit throughout the year, since different times of year, depending on what holidays we're discussing, have different party needs. Obviously, Halloween is a big time for spooky costume parties, but then there's Christmas and St. Patrick's Day, 4th of July, all sorts of times of the year, and hey, every day is someone's birthday. So, you got that too. The point is, there was plenty of opportunities and reasons to create a store that catered to this particular need. And indeed, Party City did just that for roughly 39 years until about, let me check my notes, now. Because they are going out of business. What happened here? Because, nearly 40 years in the business, you'd think they'd be able to keep it together. But there were a lot, and I mean a lot, of different factors working against Party City over time. And some of them weren't their fault, and some of them were their fault. It really depends on how we look at it. But either way, let's start at the beginning. Party City was originally founded back in 1986 by a man named Steve Mandel. Mandel was looking to open a store, but at first he wasn't sure exactly what kind of store, but he did notice that, people liked to party. And in those days, getting access to, specific party goods, the types of products that are used for parties, was generally restricted to a lot of smaller stores, mom-and-pop kind of establishments, not full-tilt franchises. And even the big box chains, which certainly existed by 1986, had relatively limited selections for this particular need. So he thought a specialty store focusing on parties was a good idea. Within said store, you could find everything you could possibly need, because the thing about parties is that, generally speaking, you don't get stuff for parties that you're planning on reusing. Because, think about it. Say you're having a birthday party, how many times have you seen those specialty paper plates or custom streamers based off of your kid's favorite cartoon or video game or something? Plastic cutlery is also generally used, and the reason is parties tend to attract a lot of people, and most people don't really feel like doing a lot of dishes after a party, so they get a bunch of disposable stuff. Plenty of party decorations do not get reused for the next party, because they're special events, and they have special needs. And that meant a lot of return customers for this, because every time they had a party, they had to buy more paper plates or whatever it is you were looking for. Mandel started with a relatively small amount of money, $125,000, and opened a 400 square foot store in East Hanover, New Jersey, which he dubbed Party City. That was the name from the start. And Mandel was right on the money in terms of people needing this sort of store. It was an instant hit. Within a year, he was already planning a second location, and he was approached by individuals who were looking for franchise opportunities. We've discussed franchises many times. Basically, people pay to utilize a certain brand name and store format, but handle the managing of the locations on their own. Many fast food chains, in fact, most of them, use the franchise model. It's just easier for them to manage because, well, they're not managing hardly anything directly. And it can apply to retail establishments as well. Party City was this case, at least in the beginning. He would start franchising in 1989. Also early on, he recognized the importance of Halloween. We've already talked about Spirit Halloween, but Spirit Halloween's a pop-up location. Well, Mandel also decided to do a similar thing in 1987. For one thing, the core Party City store was converted, a whole quarter of it, into a Halloween costume warehouse because, well, people needed Halloween costumes. It made sense. This netted him a whole bunch of sales, and for many years afterward, Halloween would be a big moneymaker for the entire company overall. They even made it a point to keep Halloween costumes in their inventory year-round because the core stores weren't pop-up locations like Spirit is. The reason for this was to simply make customers aware of what Party City would have for that particular holiday, so they could come back and get those costumes later, or even just get them early, whatever. And they also eventually started doing the pop-up model, founding Halloween City, which basically has the same exact style of Spirit pop-up stores that only show up during the season and then disappearing until the next year. By 1990, Mandel owned personally 4 different Party City locations. That's not including the franchise locations. That same year, he did incorporate as a franchising operation, and by the end of it, there were a total of 11 Party Cities. 5 more franchise stores were added in 91, 16 in 92, 26 in 93, which would bring the grand total of 58 Party City locations in various spots in America. Stores would also start opening over in Hawaii and Puerto Rico. And Mandel made himself busy by refining the overall concept. He wanted a very specific store format with very specific products, as well as nailing down dedicated suppliers. Once he had all that in a row, he actually started gearing down the franchising part of the operation, because Mandel wanted complete control over his own company, and he wanted each store location to have a wide array of different products on offer, so that anyone could walk in for whatever party they were throwing and find something they actually wanted to buy. And in the late 90s and early 2000s, the company was very successful. In 2005, however, it would be sold to a company called Amscan, which itself was a subsidiary of AAH Holdings Corporation. Now, this wasn't necessarily a bad thing. For one thing, it netted Mandel a ton of money from the sale of the company, and for two, Amscan in and of themselves were a designer, manufacturer, and distributor of party goods. That was like their whole thing. They just wanted some control over the retail side of things too, not just production. In 2006, they would also get a hold of Party America, and then in 2007, Factory Card and Party Outlet, incorporating them under the Party City brand, which resulted in Party City being the largest party supplies retailer in the United States. Amscan on their own would continue to grow as well, and they acquired the Designwear Party division of American Greetings in 2011. Party City would wind up having enough pull to get licensing agreements with a whole bunch of different companies. Nickelodeon, Sesame Workshop, Hasbro, MLB, NBA, NFL, NHL, NCAA, all sorts of things that cater to those specific brands, which is huge. People like brands and cartoon characters and sports and all this stuff. Party City had deals with these brands to sell these particular products, which people were very eager to get a hold of. But people have Super Bowl parties all the time. Party City sold a bunch of NFL stuff, and they had the good sense to get into the online market. You could go on their website and purchase this stuff that way too. So in that vein, Party City wasn't as threatened by the rise of internet shopping because they had chosen to make sure they were a part of it as well, but it was starting to be a bit of a concern, but more on that later. Also in 2011, they expanded outside of the United States for the first time because they acquired the Canadian retailer known as Party Packagers. In 2012, they would rebrand all of those to simply Party City to unify things. In 2013, they also bought iParty. And in 2017, they got a hold of MG Novelty Corporation, which came with 7 stores known as Party Galaxy. Also in 2017, they purchased back some of their franchise locations located in the Carolinas. Based on all this, it sounds like they're doing pretty well, and yeah, they were for a while, but things were starting to change as the 2010s wore on and into 2020. For one thing, in 2018, they decided it was a really great decision, just a super-de-duper top-tier, big-brain moment, to open 50 Toy City pop-up locations. Judging by the name, featuring toys, this decision was not only to take advantage of the holiday season, because toys, Christmas, that makes sense, but what didn't make sense is that they were trying to capitalize upon the closure of Toys R Us, which we've talked about before. A lot of those Toy Cities wound up in formerly occupied Toys R Us's. Now, let's just sit down and think about this for a second. You have a whole toy chain that just went under, and you're gonna assume a temporary lease in the same exact building as that former toy store and put in another toy store. If it didn't work once, why would you think it would work again? What are you doing? That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard in my life. And as you can imagine, Toy City was not really a great success. I mean, they were a pop-up, so I'm sure they made a fair amount of money for the holiday season, but not enough to justify it. And indeed, the following spring in 2019, they announced they were going to close 45 locations to help optimize our market-level performance. Yeah, okay. Corporate boilerplate, got it. Something screwy is going on here. Later that same year, they sold off their Canadian operations entirely to Canadian Tire. Huh. Not the company one would expect, but hey, they bought them, so they no longer had the Canadian stores. But where things got really screwy was about 2020, when a certain pandemic occurred. Yeah, remember all those restrictions? I'm sure you do. No social activities, no large gatherings. That's weird. That all sounds like a whole bunch of parties that we're not allowed to have anymore. Interesting. Yeah, that was a huge problem for Party City, because in their particular market, they're not selling necessary items. It's all about the parties, which no one was having, for the most part. I mean, I know plenty of people that still fought the man, how dare you tell us what to do, government, and I get it, I do. Also, most people, yeah, they weren't throwing any parties, and they certainly weren't shopping at Party City as a direct result. Their revenue took a huge hit, and they were already not really in a good spot because of some other shenanigans that were going on. For one thing, Party City was starting to be seen as really tacky, and frankly old. The stores hadn't been re-imaged, basically ever. And when you walked in, well, you just felt like you were stepping into a really cheap and gross establishment. It didn't help that a lot of the merch they were selling, which remember was meant to be disposable, because parties? Well, yeah, it was just kind of disposable junk. And due to the economic issues that were associated with those years, and still are now, a lot of people weren't spending a lot on parties if they were having them at all. Plus, a lot of big box establishments had started to zero in on the market. Places like Walmart and Target had expanded their party inventory into major franchises, and you could get cheap paper plates at any grocery store. Even the Halloween costumes had a pretty decent selection at those large establishments, so people didn't need to bother going to a specialty store like Party City for them. And remember, Halloween was supposed to be huge for Party City, but Spirit had become a serious competitor in this market, and Spirit didn't have the problem of having to maintain their operations year-round, remember. They were always a pop-up chain, so they only had to deal with leases that lasted maybe a couple of months, not ones that were there for years. Party City was meant for year-round stuff, and yeah, people throw parties year-round, but it has its ups and downs when it comes to that sort of thing, especially when it's something that people don't see as necessary. Consumer habits had also shifted as well. A lot of modern people, particularly young people, don't actually really bother throwing big bashes anymore. The modern consumer public has become kind of fixated on internet, digital hangouts, rather than going anywhere or bothering to put in the time and effort to actually throw a physical party. Why do it? It was a waste of time and money, and you were effectively buying a bunch of disposable junk. People just weren't as interested in that type of deal. And Party City didn't really understand this. It had even gotten to the point where the government of New Jersey offered them a multi-million-dollar tax break if they moved some of their operations to a different city, and therefore made jobs there. They never got that tax break, because they never actually did what they were supposed to do. Why not? In any event, the point was that they just weren't making money anymore. And on January 17th, 2023, Party City Holdco Incorporated, as it is officially known, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protections. They were heavily in debt by this point, like a lot of debt, like over $1 billion in debt. Though at first it seemed like they might actually be able to survive. They secured an additional $150 million in financing to keep the doors open, and focused heavily on restructuring, which they said they had finished by September 6, 2023. They even managed to eliminate over $1 billion of debt during that reorganization process, and that sounds really good. Like, it's not easy to eliminate that much debt, and they had pulled it off, so a majority of the stores were expected to stay open. But by the following year, 2024, it looked like things were going downhill again. Yeah, they had restructured themselves, but consumer habits hadn't changed. People just weren't shopping at Party City. If anyone was throwing a party, they were grabbing the disposable stuff they needed from where they always went to do their regular shopping. The big box chains. People just weren't going to Party City. And I've actually seen a lot of people comment about this, blaming Amazon, and Amazon might be a part of it, but remember, Party City did have an online store already, and when it comes to parties, a lot of people wait till the last minute to get their stuff. True, you can go get party supplies on Amazon, that is an option, but I think the issue is the other brick and mortar establishments. Party supplies are just like, oh right, I need that. Kind of a thought for people, just a last minute thing, and it's easier to grab that while you're thinking about it at Walmart when you're doing your regular grocery shopping or something like that. Not everything is Amazon's fault. Also, if you really don't like Amazon, then maybe you should stop having that Amazon Prime subscription. Now seriously, I have seen more than one person on social media complain about Amazon, yet still maintain their Prime subscription. Like, you're part of the problem then. If you don't like Amazon, stop giving them your money. It's actually very easy to do that. You have just chosen not to and complain while doing nothing about it. Okay. Anyway, in December of 2024, Party City issued a warning that they were preparing to file bankruptcy again because they were frankly just running out of money. They didn't have any more. They couldn't maintain operations. And they did, indeed, follow through on this. And this time it was Chapter 7, liquidation. And this was also something that had thrown their employees completely out of whack. Basically, no one really saw it coming internally. To the point that one of the last minute things they told their employees before they were out of jobs is that, oh yeah, by the way, you won't be getting any severance pay that we promised you because we don't have it. Yo! That's not very party of you. Now you might be saying, well, my local Party City is still open. How long is that gonna last? Well, they actually have an official shutdown date. They plan on closing every single US location by February 28th, 2025. A little over a month as I'm recording this. However, it isn't quite over for the brand because, remember, they did have some franchisees. Those locations are still in their hands and will remain open as long as the franchisee chooses to. In this case, it's mostly the places in Puerto Rico, oddly enough. And also remember, they sold off their Canadian operations. Canadian Tire owns those, and they have not been affected by this bankruptcy because they are technically a separate entity now, meaning that the Canadians will still have their Party City, and you might too, depending on where you live. There are also a handful of franchisees in Hawaii, and those too will remain open. But most of the stores, all of them that are owned by the core company, are shutting down. And in terms of how they could have avoided this, well, I think it just has to do with their niche. They probably should have started winding things down a lot faster than they did. saving money where they could, because frankly, I think they were just occupying a space that no one really contributes to financially anymore. A lot of people just stopped shopping at Party City. Yeah, the pandemic restrictions did not help at all. Quarantine kneecapped them hard, but they were a dying brand before that, purely because of the modern market. People just don't do the cheap party stuff anymore. If they're doing cheap, they're not spending any money at all, and are hanging out with their buddies playing a game online or something. The internet's really changed the game in terms of social gatherings. Technically speaking, you don't have to gather to be social anymore. Meaning that parties in general are a lot rarer. It probably doesn't help that even for sports events, well, a lot of people are actually going to things like restaurants and sports bars to celebrate the big game. Or even just have a quiet night drinking a beer at home and watching it. People change, their habits change. Plus, in the struggling market, when the people with less money need to save it, the last thing they're going to do is spend any of it on a party. And you might be saying, well, what about the wealthier people? Yeah, the wealthier people aren't spending money at Party City. They get their fancy party supplies in a much different location. I'm not sure there's anything they could have done to avert this, but I do think they could have softened the blow, and perhaps pivot to a slightly different market. But they didn't do that. And now, well, they're going away. And there'll be no more parties for anybody. Forever. And with that, a special thank you goes out to all my underwater train finders. Sundude267, Benjamin Owens, Anzac A1, Jack Carson's Road Videos, Lord All 444, Icer for 1405, Charles Kwiatkowski, Matt Weaver, Tom Redline, Annis Production 104, Wheeljack 8401, Rescues Greyhounds, Josh Johnson, Killer Brain Watchers, Perez Drenton, Master of None, Travis Olinsky, JBL Explorers, Tommy Rossini, Ben McCullough, Panzer Kitchen 131-232, Mark Holding, Mr. Cherevel, Hayden DeGrow, Kurt Forkham, Harry, Drew Dupree, George Kenny, Kevin Wood, Dur Roushi, William Nemo, Metal for Life Guy, Andrew Bowen, Crimson Rose, Ryan Wehofer, Zintek M, Boss K, Orange Glass, Andy, Ohio Trucker 1, Windy City Rails, John Videola, Extra Special J, Bob Condirk, Jared Brussel, Daryl Williams, DE Ultra, Connor Hahn, Ryan Philly, Nathaniel Brown, Liam Wright, Mr. Sleepy, Rashad Austin, Westmost, DFL Church, Profound Punk, The Baxter, Bad Train Puns Are Best, Raymond Zabo, AET Museum, Arthur Roy, Caleb Crosswhite, Jeff's Android, Taka Yamato, Andy Nick, Hendrick Motorsports Fan 5, Camo Guy 222, Jonathan Goko, SSM 316, Shimasu, NJ 1969, Murder Drone Stall, Hannah Bird, and of course, my dad. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.